So, all right. So, what I like about this website, and let me just show you the website. What I like about that website is that it actually has the, like I said, the recitation one, and it also has what choice of translation you want, because not all translations are necessarily the same. In where some translations, and here's the thing, is that no matter how far and how good the translation is, it can't really give you the total meaning, like in every single corner. So it can give you some glimpse of that interpretation. All right. So Sahih International, all right, Sahih International was actually a translation that was done by a convert. And guess what? She's actually from Minnesota. Yep. She was from Minnesota and she did that Sahih International. And what I like about it is that it will read it for you. It will tell you word by word and what that means. And this is really important. So let me explain first the surah in general so you guys can really see, and then we'll go into those details. All right. So the surah in general is Surah Al-Fajr. Now, here's the thing, is that in the Quran, there are actually a number of different surahs that will speak about a certain place, a certain time, just because it is really important to recognize the different elements of what surrounds you. So what surrounds you is to give you that idea of how you can relate to the pattern that surrounds you with your own life. So wal fajr, by the dawn. All right. So it's here considering that dawn moment, look at it just like you see there's a certain pattern in this world in terms of what brings time, in terms of place, etc. So time, in terms of time, you're seeing there's the darkness, then there is that moment when light comes in. وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ, layalin ashr, but basically the 10 days. What 10 days? So it is here indicating that yes, there is a general timing of how time basically moves on, but then layalin ashr, 10 days, that there are certain days that are more specific, that are more holy, or something to commemorate, something to consider. And the 10 days that is referring to here are the 10 days of Hajj days. All right. So the 10 days of Hajj, and it's telling you of how it commemorates a certain event. What was that event? The event that it commemorates when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he goes to Mecca. All right. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders him through a dream that he has to slaughter his own son. But then, and this is a very important thing to say, is that he was in total submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was about to slaughter his own son. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a ram to slaughter instead of his own son. And then that takes us into the other resemblance of what Hajj really is, in whether it's Hajar trying to search for water, but then the reason why she accepted to stay in Mecca was really because Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam told her that it was really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that had ordered Prophet Ibrahim, to be in that land in order to make him a great nation. All right. So then she would go back and forth between Safa, the mountains of Safa, and Marwa, and then Zamzam gushes water from underneath Prophet Ismail's feet, and then Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, of course, later, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam slaughters that ram instead of his own son, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him into the test. And how Prophet Ibrahim later builds, along with Ismail alayhi salam, builds the Kaaba to commemorate submission to Allah Almighty. And the whole process is really to to bring in that inspiration from Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and Prophet Ismail, and also the woman. So look at it. There's a child, there's a father, and there's a wife. This whole family was commemorating and in full submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are asked to commemorate, to get the inspiration by going over their steps, going over a woman's steps, going over a man's steps, going over a child's steps, in building a house, in walking the steps in search of food or water, and in search of safety, and going and taking where you would want to stay in terms of shelter, and that it's all supposed to be going towards the purpose of submitting yourself to Allah Almighty. So Layal Ashr is really telling us, listen, there are those times, but really what really matters is really the time that you commemorate the steps of obedience to your Lord Almighty. And those are the Layal Ashr. Those are the 10 days for you to recognize those bonus days. وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ. Now, الشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ, scholars actually had differences of opinions on what is it really referring to, Shaf'i wal-Watr. So Shaf'i wal-Watr, the word Shaf'i really means dual things. So we're talking about even numbers. And al-watr is really the odd numbers. But here, it's not necessarily just that, although remember, when the Quran was revealed, these are Meccan ayat, people were not ready to listen. So it was really just indicating things that they knew what it was really referring to. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was referring to, you see the pattern of duality and the pattern of certain things that are actually in not odd numbers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted them to recognize the pattern in the creation and the specific intricate patterns that you would find in creation. So what embraces creation in terms of time? We've got dimension of space, time, and of course, energy that makes these things rotate. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you, well, there are certain things that hold these pieces together. Those are the elements of numbering. All right, so shafa is duality, is two things, in where the pattern of, for example, male and female, the patterns that you would find in the world, in where there is a day and night. All right, you would find male, female, you would find big and small, etc. You would find those shafa, their duality of things, and there's also al-watr. And when you speak about al-shaf'i wal-watr, there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one, but and this is really important, because when you look at the ayah, and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, كل شيء خلقنا زوجين لعلكم تذكرون, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ash-Shura also mentions that things were created in duality, but then emphasizes that, well, that duality that you see in the creation does not apply on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ash-Shura, فَاطِرُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, He's the creation of the heavens and the earth. جَعَلْ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا, He created from within you the pairs, the spouses. وَمِنَ الْأَنْعَامِ أَزْوَاجًا, and even the same pattern applies onto animals. يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ, well, now you're created within this creation that has certain patterns. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not follow the pattern of duality. So don't look at and say, well, we could see male, female, so is God male or female? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. The duality pattern does not apply on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, same thing. In where لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Well, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it doesn't mean He is silent. It doesn't mean that the Lord Almighty doesn't have the powers that we as human beings have, but in fact, He is a Sami' al-Basir. He in fact has something that is beyond our ability to hear and beyond our ability to see. He's all seeing, all hearing. At the same time, he continues, له مقاليد السماوات والأرض. He's the one that controls the function of the heavens and the earth. So this is in order to relate to, anywhere when you're looking at tafsir, you really have to connect the different ayat with the different ayat in one surah with another ayat in other surahs in order to recognize what is it really referring to. So yes, it's telling you about the pattern of the creation, and then what controls the pattern of the creation, with the the pattern within this creation. So you've got the time, you've got the certain intricate laws of physics, chemistry, whatever it is, the biology, different things that you find in nature. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot apply those rules on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to ask the question, for example, somebody might say, well, everything was created, so who created Allah? Well, the question is really based on the assumption that everything was created, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a creature. To actually consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a creature is really going off and using the different laws of physics that you know about the world around you and actually applying it on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond creation. So you cannot assume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a creature and assume that, well, what applies there should apply here. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرَ, and continues, well, just like Fajr, what brings dawn also brings those intricate numbers or the intricate sophisticated laws that make such days and nights happen. So as night comes in and easily passes, هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر? Is there a mind? So هل في ذلك, is there في ذلك, in such, in what? Well, in such would include والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر. So those are, let's count them. والفجر, by the dawn, by the 10 nights, by the duality and even, duality or even and odd, and by the night. So those are four, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are 5 different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was actually swearing by in order to bring about to our attention their holiness and their importance. And if you could see the function of such elements and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls the different elements, whether it's the night, the day, the dawn, etc., well, then you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond all your power to change the facts that lie around you. So that's why هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر, it's something that you really, هل في ذلك, is there anyone that can recognize the qasam? The qasam means how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was swearing by these elements. لذي حجر, with somebody that has the mind that can deeply think about what these really mean, like how dangerous this qasam really is. The qasam means swearing by something. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. So then it wants to take us into a story. أَلَمْ تَرَ, have you not seen how your Lord Almighty had done with Ad? Ad is basically a tribe that was living in Saudi Arabia. All right, they were a Qawm Hud. All right, Qawm Hud, Prophet Hud alayhi salam went to them, and it's really important to recognize what they were really living like. All right, they were not whatsoever how the media might portray the man during those times as somehow naive, stupid, wasn't able to get what we have today. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you, well, wait a minute, actually, this is what they had. إِرَمَ ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ. Well, it wasn't just Ad. Ad had built magnificent fortresses, magnificent castles. They were able to carve the mountains and build great architecture. And when you say build great architecture, it actually means they knew math, they knew physics, they studied, the ability to control different elements in nature. That's what it basically means. So to assume that these people were stupid, Stone Age, is actually wrong. These people definitely had the mind, but they didn't have the wisdom and the recognition to look beyond materialistic life of what they had. إرم ذات العماد. In إرم ذات العماد. The إرم, of course, it's basically their ancestor, the ancestor for Ad. They built these fortresses, they built these castles with very, very huge poles. In other words, there were columns that were really big. ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد. In fact, that for those fortresses, that architecture, لم يخلق مثلها. Never was anything created in any nation like it whatsoever. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really telling us that their architecture was so magnificent that you would not find any other civilization building something like it. Well, it wasn't just Ad, but it was also Thamud. Thamud, which was nearby in terms of history, in other words, chronologically speaking, and nearby in terms of area. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even bring about Ad and Thamud and not talk about the different nations that were in China or probably in the Americas at the time? Why bring those people, to the Arab? Was basically because those are the areas that the Arab were actually familiar with. So if, for example, all right, I'm going to say, hey, Ismail, did you see what happened to Rafan when he didn't study? He basically got this grade, all right? Well, if I were to say, hey, Ismail, did you see what happened to Hudhaifa? He got this grade because he didn't study. You don't know Hudhaifa. So to actually make it as an example and tell you, hey, Ismail, did you see what happened to Hudhaifa? You're like, and who's Hudhaifa? But if I were to say, did you see what happened to Rafan, for example, you're going to say, yeah, okay, I see the resemblance. Right? And that's the same thing. In where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was bringing Thamud and Ad to the pagan Arab in order for them to recognize the resemblance, to recognize the pattern, and said, وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ جَابُوا الصَّخْرَ فِي الْوَادِ. Well, there's also the tribe of Thamud that had actually Jabu, and whether they were so strong, they had such great body power that they were capable of grinding, building, breaking down huge stones and huge rocks, and even bringing it up all the way in a valley. So they were able to take it down from a valley and actually build on the top part of the mountains. And of course, it takes a lot of physics, it takes a lot of math to actually figure out how to get control over those hard pieces of nature. Oh, you want more civilizations? Well, here we go. Let's talk about the pharaohs. Fir'aun dhil awtad. Well, Fir'aun, the pharaohs, they actually had awtad. They were actually, the word awtad, watad is really, when you build a tent, in order to make the tent stand up, you would put something like in the middle, and then you would have to put things on the corners to build and make sure that the whole tent doesn't fall over your head. And that's the same thing. And where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَفِرْعَوْنَ ذِي الْأَوْتَادِ. Now, here's the thing, is that the pagan Arabs didn't really know much about the pyramids of the pharaohs. They just knew that there was a nation there, and they just knew that there was a civilization. And of course, it preceded them by almost 4,000 years. So by the pharaohs were 4,000 years before the Prophet ﷺ. Can you guys imagine? But they still remembered 4,000 years. All right. Remember, you guys, look at time. Okay. Oh, wow. So 4,000 years or 3,000 years. All right. Before the Prophet ﷺ. But then it wants to put, well, now you recognize you've got nation number one, Ad, you got nation number two, Thamud, and you got nation or civilization number three, Firaun. And it wanted to put them, well, all these nations, you saw how the focus on the architecture, you saw their body power. And again, if there's architecture, that means there's mental power, there is body power, and there's definitely the ability to put the mental piece together and of course the body piece together in order to make a civilization happen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us, well, now that you recognize, the different pieces that they were getting. And that's the same thing, even as human beings, we tend to focus on our body power, our mental power, and definitely that brings in the money power, right? When you have the degrees and when you have the body power, you've got your health, and that's going to bring in most likely more and more successes in getting things in dunya, in getting probably a house, a beautiful car, fame, and all these different things. All right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then continues, well, they all, even though people would focus on what type of things that they had built, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, they actually did something that was the most important focus that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned about. الَّذِينَ طَغَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ. Those alladhina would refer to all the different mentioned nations. Well, they طغوا. The word طغى actually means to super exceed a limit of something. And what did they exceed the limit of? They exceeded the limit of justice. They exceeded the limit of justice in 5 different elements. All right, so let's look at that. All right, the 5 different elements. All right, in number 1, in the deen, in terms of worship, they didn't worship Allah Almighty, but they actually worshiped idols, and here's the thing, they put in a narrative. Why did they worship idols? Well, they put in a narrative and they considered, hey, we don't necessarily need an argument. They recognize that that particular idol is definitely not God, but they put in a narrative and said, well, these things have an inspiration. They remind us, they inspire us about the good things, they inspire us to do different things, and they started worshiping those things later on. So it really began with a narrative, and then it became the idea, it became the philosophy. All right, so then they also transgressed the limit in terms of justice and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered laws. This is really important because when you speak about laws, you're actually speaking about putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws on the ground, not your laws. Because once you put in your laws, then this is going to be selfishness. This is going to be the greed. And if selfishness and greed are the foundation of laws, which is like capitalism, all right, then expect injustice to happen. And that's where the injustice will happen on, one, their understanding of different things, which is aql. They will, if there is the foundation itself actually going off the limit, which is mind, how you perceive things. If that's going the wrong direction, then it's kind of like you're wearing the wrong glasses. If you're wearing the wrong glasses to measure things, you're not seeing things right. Well, definitely you're going to confuse things. So that's why when you look at how you measure things, you need the glasses of seeing things through Allah Almighty. And of course, the prophets were there in order to identify and actually tell you what those things are, and not really base it on your own delusion. All right. So that's why when we look at it, we've got Quran and Sunnah. That's to help you see the things based on what they really are. And the other part, so you've got the other part, D and A. The other part is I and M. I is basically family. So then you started having social destruction, injustice, on a social level, and that is going to bring in the injustice on an economical level. So that's why the ayah said, الَّذِينَ طَغَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ. So they had transgressed the limit on all levels, on a religious level, on a personal, in a social justice level, on a financial level. And then that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you, well, what you should be looking for and what you should be concerned about is really not how people might look into a civilization. So this is redefining civilization. All right, you guys, this is redefining civilization and telling us what makes a civilization is not by how many skyscrapers they build or how many or how far they were capable of creating or building different architecture or making even body power and health and etc. Yes, those are important advancements, but that's not what makes a civilization. The most important advancement is really when you are seeing a civilization, when you're seeing the truth based on Allah Almighty, because then you are living the purpose of Allah Almighty. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you was not in order to build the world only. That is one piece of it. But the purpose you were created for was really to be tested. Was really to be tested. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, yeah, they built all this civilization, but that's not what matters. What matters is that they had actually transgressed the limit, and the word taghaw, transgressed the limit in all the cities. So what did they do? So then, semicolon, فَأَكْثَرُوا فِيهَا الْفَسَادِ. They had caused a lot of destruction. So فَأَكْثَرُوا means they had brought in a lot of, the word is fasad. So fasad actually tells us, the word fasad actually comes from the root fasada. Fasada actually means to bring in chaos. To bring in chaos in what? Let's put the 5 different elements again. All right, you guys, these are elements that you have to memorize as you would memorize your own name. All right, I always use this. These elements are extremely important. Without memorizing these elements, you're really going to confuse a lot of different things, and you're not going to be sure how you understand your Islam. So I'm going to here right there, morals in Islam. I'm just going to bring you this little slide so you could actually see it. All right, just hold on. Because when we're talking about evil and when we're talking about good and evil, there are certain things that we have to recognize. Okay, what makes truth? What makes a balance? All right, it's not based on you and I, and it's definitely not based on what this or that philosopher says that balance is. It's basically based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, there are different philosophies in what they tell you about ethics, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, hey, listen, you see all these philosophies about ethics? Hey, you gotta just put it into perspective, and you gotta know that these theories in terms of what makes something right and wrong, a lot of them are really based on theory, and they would tell you that it's based on human understanding and intellect, but a lot of it is really based on theory. They would speculate, but that's not necessarily what it is. And then you've got a lot of people putting in money by funding their own desires, by funding, of course, a certain lobby to promote a certain interpretation of what makes something the truth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, well, wait a minute, no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually sent you, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent you the guidance. And the guidance, in order to find it, you got to go back to the Quran. You got to go back to the prophets. You got to go back to the practice that the Prophet ﷺ practiced it in. And at the same time, you want to remember that when you look at ethics, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you, listen, there are a number of different elements. And even though it says idiom, but it's actually an acronym. All right. So I just make it easy. And I actually put it in this acronym. Okay. Let's put it right there. An acronym. Okay. Is that right? Yeah. So you've got this acronym right there, in where I usually put it as a DNAIM. What's the DNA of Islam? What is the main foundation, the main core of ethics in Islam, it's really to maintain spirituality. Spirituality is not an issue of just spirituality, okay? It's about maintaining. Why is it even important? Well, you want to think of life when you look at life, all right? The purpose of something is what brought in the creation of something. It's not the opposite. So the idea to see, or the element to see, is what made the eye. It's not that the eye was there and then it's like, let's just use it for sight. No, your purpose for life preceded. It means it came before your existence. You don't make up a purpose and say, well, so that I'm here, let me create a purpose for myself. No, you have to understand your existence is actually coming later after deciding and determining the purpose. So the purpose came first. So that's why when you actually consider what makes the deen, it's number one is really heading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even became, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was there before even creation itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not die. Number two is that when we're talking about social justice, it involves preserving your life, preserving other people's lives, and of course, that is maintaining the first piece of social justice, which is life. The second piece of social justice, and it's really maintaining education, maintaining mental health as well. So causing people to distress, or causing people to go into probably anxiety and mental illness, or even not understanding that, hey, education is also another piece of social justice, and we're giving people the right to education is actually the third piece. Fourth piece is chastity. And when we talk about chastity, we're talking about family. All right, we're talking about family as well. So to maintain chastity and family. So what is that even related to it? All right, chastity is the way you relate with the opposite sex. So for example, a boy relating to a girl, or a girl relating to a boy, you maintain a certain morality, and that morality must be in order to preserve and make family. So any type of an outside relationship, even if it's male and male, it's actually outside of making family, and therefore this is considered a transgression, meaning you went off the limit. So in that situation, that is going to cause people's rights, people's social rights, and people's responsibility to be at risk. And of course, this is going to cause the destruction in the world and chaos. The fifth one is wealth. In where wealth and property, where you get the property from, where you get the wealth from, how you use and spend that wealth, and how you consider the management is actually part of what it means to maintain justice, economical justice, social justice, political justice, and you go on and on. So when the ayat are actually speaking about these elements, it's in order for us to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all right, where's my Quran? Okay, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us that these people have went and crossed and went beyond their limit. So what did they do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ طَغَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ. They had crossed the limit. What limit? The ones that we just mentioned in the acronym DNAIM. فَأَكْثَرُوا فِيهَا الْفَسَادِ. So they caused a lot of destruction. So what was the result? The result was فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ. فَصَبَّ actually means to pour. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pour over them? سَوْطَ عَذَابٍ. The Lord Almighty poured over them a huge amount of punishment and torture. So why was that torture or punishment actually put at them? Well, it was put at them because they caused destruction and chaos in the world. So what does that mean? Let's look at, for example, today in our life. All right. So what happens if you go against the structure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for you? Well, then you're going to harm your body. So in other words, that's the same thing. You go against the structure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created. What structure? The purpose of life. The structure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered that we maintain this world in. Well, then expect in return for causing a destruction, that a destruction would come to you. Simple as that. If you cause a destruction, well, the destruction is going to come to you. It's simple as that. It's, it's actually a whole pattern. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. And surely, your Lord is labil mirsad. He was in total observation, presence, holding them accountable. Labil mirsad. He was looking them with total scrutiny. He was watching them with total scrutiny. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ. Now, he wanted to tell you, well, this is in general about human nature, but now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to take you from a bird's eye, looking at the people in general, to actually taking you as individuals. Let's look at as individuals, how we relate to the world around us. So then he says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ. He didn't say kafir. He actually said, as for. So now, after telling us about the different civilizations, then he goes deeper and says, as for. فَأَمَّا. As for al-insan, human beings, whenever they are, the word is ibtalahu. Ibtalahu means to be put on a trial. So if humans are put in a trial by their Lord Almighty, فَأَكْرَمَهُ. Well, wait a minute. I thought to be put on trial actually means to be put in a hard situation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, I want to look at something here. فَأَكْرَمَهُ. If he was given and granted different elements, in other words, different bounties, وَنَعَمَهُ, granted him lots of bounties, all right? But here the ayah says, ibtalahu. What is that supposed to mean? That don't necessarily think that the bounties that you have, whether it's a beautiful home, healthy body, power, position, a good job, kids, fame, beauty, handsomeness, whatever it is, don't necessarily think that it was really because of something that you deserve. All right? It's not something necessarily that you deserve. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, be careful, because that might actually be a test. So you might be given the intelligence, you just happen to be really smart, and it could be the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be testing you with. And the other person, they're probably granted a certain political or even, let's say, a social power, and where they probably managed to get up into a certain level within, probably a CEO in a company, but it's really to test you in. So don't take advantage of that position. Well, just like these people, they were granted the body power, they were granted the mind, the ability to, build that civilization, but that was actually to test them in that. And that's the same thing. If you're granted any form of a bounty, that's really to test you in. But most people. So now this is actually saying, فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. So this is supposed to be a parenthesis clause. So this is in parentheses, فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. But man, when they're granted, even though it's a test, and they're granted so many bounties, they would say and claim that they would say, my Lord Almighty had blessed me with this. What did they want to infer? They wanted to infer that if I wasn't so good, and if I wasn't just so smart, and if I didn't deserve any of this, I wouldn't have been granted all this, and didn't recognize that not necessarily that the bounties that you have with you, they're not necessarily because you deserve them. It could actually be a test, all right? And at the same time, that the bounties that you have are not necessarily because you did it. It's not necessarily because you just happen to be so smart and bring it to yourself, but it is actually something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you, but then when وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ, as for when they're actually put in a trial. And then فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. فَقَدَرَ means to evaluate the rizq, the different bounties, the different provisions that they would get. But the person would say, فَقُلُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. And then they would say, well, my Lord Almighty was the one that didn't actually give me enough. Then they would start claiming that it was Allah Almighty's fault. Not, they would just look at it that it's not that they were necessarily deserving, for example, anything, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might be putting them in a hard situation to get them out of a different situation, or maybe the hard situation that they are put in to probably maybe not necessarily the best health, or not necessarily probably the best wealth or the most wealth, etc. But man will basically say, well, it's basically Allah's fault and not his fault. And then they would basically accuse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one that is responsible, but they're still good. They deserve better. They don't deserve to be in the situation that they're in. And this is usually what man will be putting and claiming that, hey, I deserve better. I'm such a good person. And it's really Allah's fault. It's just that I don't deserve to be in here. I don't deserve to be in this type of distress. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they are not recognizing. كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم. كلا, verily, بل لا تكرمون اليتيم. What really brought all the poor rizq? Why did the rizq actually go away? Said, well, because you were really بل لا تكرمون اليتيم. Verily, you're not hospitable to the orphans. ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين. And you don't order. I want you to look at the word تحاضون. تحاضون means to order one another. So and at the same time, you don't order one another to feed the needy. So here are a number of different things. So كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم. What is that related to this? Well, the way it's related to it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, don't look at the rizq as, yes, I'm supposed to be getting it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, there are certain things that you need to consider. Is that in order to be granted something, you really have to live the principle of giving. Let's do it again. To be granted, in our mental mind, we usually think in order to be granted something, we have to maintain and get and preserve and keep. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, no, in order to get something, you want to give. All right? Ismail, are you with me here? If you want to give, if you want to get, you got to give. So how's that even possible? Well, just think of it as a when you're actually buying. All right? In order to buy something, what do? You have to give in. You have to give. You give in money to get something. And that's the same thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, in order to get more money, you need to share. But our human mind would usually think that doesn't make sense, because in order for me to get, I have to keep. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, no, you have the whole thing wrong, because the principle of giving will actually bring you that sharing that others will want to share with you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, give the orphans and let that be what brings you satisfaction, what gives you the happiness, and what gives you that satisfaction on the inside. And don't make it just you yourself, but as a community, you have to, as a community, provoke one another or excite or make an initiative to excite others and recommend and invite others to do the right thing. And what right thing? In where you're feeding the needy. But here's the one thing. Why did it talk about the orphans and the needy? Well, it talked about the orphans and the needy because when you actually give the orphans and the needy, they don't have really any money to give you anything. And which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, when you are giving, you want to make sure you're giving not to get for the sake of getting, but you're wanting to give not for to get from the people, but to get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in where you're sincere in your action. You're living the principle of sincerity. But people, وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاثَ أَكْلًا لَمًّا. People, تأكلون means you eat up. You eat up inheritance. أكلا لما. You would eat it left and right. Halal, haram doesn't matter to you, because man is so greedy that they just want to maintain, get. And that's why the ayah says تأكلون التراث. Now, تأكلون is usually you don't eat money. Do you eat dollars and cents? No, you don't eat the dollars and cents. But it's just like a profound word in where it's trying to tell you, people, you don't eat a home, but people, they just want to maintain and take any wealth. It's like they think that they could just swallow it up. They think they could just maintain everything, when in reality, they can't really maintain it at the end. تأكلون التراث أكلا لما. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to tell us that people would be as if this right here is a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's like you're eating up and trying to eat up all the wealth. Halal, haram, it belongs to you, it doesn't belong to you. You just have your eyes on it and you just want to get it. وتحبون المال حبا جما. وتحبون, and you love wealth deeply. حبا جما. It's like deep love, and you're so considerate over who's taking it, who's using it, when are they bringing it back, etc. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, oh, this is a reality about human beings. Now that you recognize the reality of human beings, and the reason why they're actually trying to maintain wealth is because they live thinking that that's what's going to bring them security, that's going to give them longevity, that's what's going to bring them happiness, that's what's going to give them power, advancement, etc. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, كَلَّا إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا. كَلَّا, it's like, verily not. إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ. Dukkat means to bake and make a big shake. When the earth shakes, a huge shake after shake after shake, which is why the ayah says dukkat, dakkan, dakka. It's like shake after shake after shake, and then it becomes an unstoppable shake. And then that unstoppable shake, why was it shaking? Because these people, they don't recognize that they need to look for the purpose of life until they're shaken after shaken after shaken numerous times. But this is talking about Judgment Day, when the earth shakes into numerous shakes in order to bring about the ending of life, the end of life. And then that brings in Judgment Day. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. And then everything changes. All the elements and all the different things that on earth they were really considerate about, everything changes. The earth is not there anymore. The money is not there anymore. The authority and all the different things that they were so proud of is gone. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. Now your Lord, the angels, are lining up in rows after rows after rows right before your eyes, as if it is a dream. But there's no way that this is a dream. You're now seeing it with your own naked eyes, so real it is right before you. وَجِيءَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمَ. And then when Jahannam, the word Ji'a, it's like it is brought on that day, but with Jahannam, the hellfire is brought. But then humans, Yawma idhin, on that day, Humans will remember. وَأَنَّ لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. And then they will remember, what did they do? Now is the real important matter. Now is the real purpose. Now is the real discussion. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the rizq. It wasn't anything. It was now time to talk about what really mattered. And the most important thing, which is their purpose in life. Now it is right before them. It is right in front of them. And وَأَنَّ لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. How would they even, how did they would just think, wow, what happened? They would just remember everything. And then those that did not do and live based on the purpose, يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي قَدَّمْتُ لِحَيَاتِي. They would say, I wish I had put in لِحَيَاتِي. Now here's the thing. What happened? Well, weren't they working to get things for their life? So the ayah says they will say, I wish I had done enough for my life. What life? They're considering that the before life in this dunya was like a dream, and that the real life is really the life they're living now. Now meaning al-akhirah within this context. فَيَوْمَئِذٍ لَا يُعَذِّبُ عَذَابَهُ أَحَدٌ. On that day, no one will be taking over. No one, says one, will be taking over their deeds, their punishment. No one will be taking over their punishment. وَلَا يُوثِقُ وَثَاقَهُ أَحَدٌ. And no one else is going to be. يُوثِقُ وَثَاقَهُ أَحَدٌ is meaning, it means to change somebody. So they're going to be chained by themselves. In other words, no one else is going to take over when they were chained, when they will be chained. But there's only يَا أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةُ. Oh, speaking to the souls, speaking to the spirits, the souls of those that were living in tranquility. What is tranquility? Living at peace. Who's living at peace? Well, the ones that are living in peace in this dunya are the ones that are going to be living in peace in akhirah. What does that mean? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you what really brings peace is really living the word of Allah Almighty. It's really living the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the people that are living in peace and tranquility. They're actually at peace. They're living in stability. And that's why the malaika will sound out, oh, the souls that were living in peace, that were living in tranquility, that were living in stability. Go back to your Lord. Irji'i. Go back to your Lord. Content. And you're content, meaning it is happy and content, and the Lord Almighty is content over it. فَدُخُلِي, and enter. فِي عِبَادِي, like with my servants. وَدُخُلِي جَنَّتِي, and enter my Jannah. So this, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those in nafs al-mutma'innah. So what is this? A number of different things before we log off. So that was a fast translation right there. So here, when you look at this segment of it, just to note, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khairat. Oh Allah Almighty, I ask you to make me from those that do what is good, because you can know what good is, but not do it. وَتَرْكِ الْمُنْكَرَاتِ, and to leave the immoral things or the wrong things or the haram things. وَحُبِّ الْمَسَاكِينَ, and make me love the needy. What does the love for the needy have to do with any of that? It because teaches you how to be humble. What does really being humble actually mean? So being humble is by not looking at others with pride and arrogance, and not looking at yourself like you are above all and that others are disgusting or less than you, but it's actually seeing that others matter. And by seeing that others' needs matter just as your needs matter, and recognizing that others' pains matter as much as your pains matter. That is being humble. And that's by staying away from pain, from causing pain onto others, And that's by staying away from arrogance, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was actually looking at it when speaking about the needy. So recognize their pains, recognizing their needs, recognizing their matters. By recognizing their matters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recognize you. By recognizing their needs, then you're living the humility and you're washing away. And I'm using the word washing because that's what tazkiyah is. You're washing away the arrogance inside of you without you realizing. And at the same time, when you look at ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna, there are 4 different types or more of nafs. There's a nafs that is in nafs al-ammara bis-su'. What does that mean? So in nafs al-ammara bis-su' is basically that nafs that will order its friend, that will order its basically person. Hey, you want more money, don't you? You want more of this. And it will be talking to you in order to push you to get more of the dunya. And there's the nafs al-lawwama. Nafs al-lawwama, it does something wrong and then it feels guilty about it. And then there is a nafs al-mutma'inna. Nafs al-mutma'inna is basically that nafs that is living a stability, was applying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rules, applying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's standards. That's why it maintained a certain level of tranquility. All right. So this is actually the end of Surah Al-Fajr. That was a fast tafseer. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask those questions. I don't know if I think I went past our time by 7 minutes, but that's all right. If you have any questions, go ahead, my friends.
I just have one comment. I'm not sure if you knew, Zuhair and Fawaz, I think they were at the first khutbah too. But at NWICC, the first khutbah, the guy mentioned you as being the chaplain for a hospital, St. Catherine's University, I think it was.
St. Catherine University, right?
Yeah, he mentioned you, and he was talking about how people should, step up into these kind of roles, and people should get trained and step up to these kind of roles, which Muslims traditionally don't seek out.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, Allah barik fi ya Rabbi. Jazakumullah khairan. Yeah, thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else wants to say anything?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.